I don't even know where to start with this. I guess I'll start by saying, it's good, so you can calm the f down. There were people who were mad at me for this video before Wave 6 was even out. The last time I was pretty critical about Wave 5, and some of y'all, well, there were people who respectfully disagreed. Bless your hearts. But then there was a Reddit that was so mad they had a nervous breakdown, screaming about my toxicity. So having the wrong Mario Kart opinion? F you, you're so toxic. Creating an echo chamber so you can go into vivid detail about why you hate a video game reviewer? Well, that ain't toxic. That's what anyone who has the wrong video game opinion basically deserves. Take notes, kids. I know people are mad when I start bringing up that Pokemon video I did nearly 10 years ago. I think we've all gotten mad at our share of dumb or petty things. But how do you hold hatred in your heart over a YouTube video you watched nearly 10 years ago? I don't even remember who I was 10 years ago. All this to say, if you disagree with anything I've said ever, you are more than validated in that opinion. You don't gotta go, hey, does anyone else hate this guy? To validate your own disagreement that was never invalid to begin with. Nothing you enjoy is suddenly invalidated because me, some random dude on the internet, criticized it. Having a sub count does not make my opinion more valid than yours, because it's not. Due to the amount of backlash, I didn't even think people would want me to cover Wave 6, but just like every other wave, it's been one of my most requested videos, even beating out Mario Wonder on a poll I ran. So f it, you guys asked for it, so here we are. Finally, we've arrived at the final wave of the booster course pass after about a year and a half since the first wave dropped. Initially, Nintendo only promised tracks, but since they started dropping these waves, we got a custom item toggle, which lets me show these tracks without having to edit around the 2 bloopers per race, thank god. A music player that lets you listen to every song in addition to every variant of every song. Updated vehicle stats that makes once obsolete parts relevant once again. Pipe frame enjoyers rejoice. And of course, the sporadic decision that the booster course pass would also include characters from Tour as well. In previous waves, we saw Birdo, PD Piranha, Wiggler, and Kamek. But now rounding off Wave 6, we get Diddy Kong, Funky Kong, Pauline, and Peachette. I've seen a few complaints about Peachette being a wasted slot, but based on what the roster looked like during Wave 5, I'm pretty sure most of us thought there were only going to be 2 more characters. For myself, it's hard to complain about an addition like Peachette when I see it more as a little extra they decided to throw in. I mean, adding characters at all is basically a little extra they decided to throw in. It always perplexes me to see the same people who get mad at people criticizing the tracks themselves turn around and act disappointed in the character choices when that was not what we were initially paying for. We paid 25 bucks for some new tracks, and some of those tracks, you know, looked like this, whereas we didn't even know we were getting characters. Honestly, while I would have loved to see Nabbit or those cool-ass 2D SNES sprites that were also in Tour, the complete roster that we got, I think it's solid. I mean, this is a big character selection. Diddy and Birdo specifically always seemed like odd omissions, but now that they're here, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe really does feel like the deluxe version in this regard. Once upon a launch day, the full roster looked like this. So seeing what we have now, I would definitely call this a win. Oh, they also added a bunch more Mii costumes for the 5 of you that actually race using your Mii. This is the part where we're going to start talking about the tracks, and I might as well give a disclaimer that I will be talking about the presentation at parts, which seems to be a huge point of contention for a lot of people. Sorry to delay the Wave 6 review itself, but this is something I do want to talk about, especially if this is the last time I'm going to be talking about the booster pass. I've seen a lot of comments claiming graphics are the only thing I talk about. It made me curious what percentage of the video I focused on it. So I took a look at my previous wave review and noted all the timestamps where I talk about textures, models, even little things like using the doves on Daisy Cruiser. Here are all of the points where I talk about anything graphics related in my last video. Of the complete duration of the 50 minutes and the 58 seconds video, a total of 3 minutes and 55 seconds was spent talking about the track's graphics. Altogether, that's almost a quarter of the video's total duration. Which, don't get me wrong, that's a lot. It's not like I'm unaware how much I talk about the subject. But 1/4 of the video is not the entire video. My only theory as to what's happening is when Hardcore 8 Deluxe fans hear me talk about the presentation, they go, because they are just so utterly flabbergasted. I could care about something they overlook. It sends them into a 2-minute coma, allowing them to miss everything else I'm saying. At which point they wake back up for 3 seconds until I mention the graphics again, resulting in another again ignoring the video until they regain consciousness in an endless cycle. That's the only thing that makes sense, because otherwise, how can so many people be convinced it's all I talk about? I only think it's fair to bring up the visuals because a majority of these tracks are 1-to-1 to their Tour counterparts, with the biggest difference being how they look. But then I'm the asshole when I talk about it, so what the f***? When reviewing these things, I believe it's more important to highlight what's different than reiterate on what hasn't changed. If I was reviewing Mario 3D All-Stars, I wouldn't thoroughly explain each game as if they're brand new. I would focus on how they're handled in the collection and what changes were made. After all, if I was an inquiring consumer, that's what I would want to know. Even then, if the tracks all consistently looked good or consistently looked bad, I wouldn't bother talking about the matter. Proof that I wouldn't is my review on the Wii U DLC all those years back, where I didn't draw attention to the graphic fidelity hardly on any of the tracks. Why? Because it was on par with the rest of the game. As to say, it was really good. And if all the booster tracks looked bad, I would just accept that and then not dwell on it any further. But they don't all look bad. There are a handful of booster course pass tracks that, on the contrary, look really good in a DLC of varying quality. I'm not going to treat all the tracks like they're equal, because they're not. If I think they did a good job, then I'm going to praise them. And if they did not, I'm going to talk about it despite any potential backlash. Hopefully that makes it more clear on why I bothered to discuss the presentation at all. Although if you still don't want to hear anything on the subject, whether it be good or bad, then I want to be transparent that I will be talking about it, and no one is forcing you to watch this video. Enough of that, let's jump into our first track, Avanti. Continuing the trend of opening with a tour track, this is another city track, once again maintaining the gimmick of having all 3 laps follow different routing. In regards to layout, there isn't a whole lot here that we haven't already seen in the previous tour tracks. The most defining thing about it would probably be that complete 360-degree turn around the Coliseum and that bridge of the chain jumps. Beyond that, it's your standard city affair that seems pretty interchangeable with the others we've seen in this DLC. That doesn't necessarily make it bad. It's a fun enough race, just forgettable is all. I will say, this is another tour track where it feels as if they designed a city first and then decided on the routing after the fact. It's not too bad on the slower engine classes, but on 200, some of these turns feel like they come out of nowhere as you aimlessly follow walls of red arrows. Visually, it's actually not too bad. Stuff like the greenery still looks pretty rough, but the stone textures in particular are really nice. Specifically the brick texture you're driving on, and the specular on them that allows the streets to be painted with this orange haze from all the streetlights is a great effect. The building textures feel a bit flat, but to be honest, if they just scaled everything down to its proper size, you know, so the doors aren't like 4 times bigger than the racers, it would all look fine. Obviously, the smaller a model or texture is, the more high def it's going to look. And I think I'm just now starting to realize that for most of these tracks, if they just scaled the buildings down and then added more of them to compensate, the level of detail they're currently at would probably be fine. It really does look like they modeled something with the intention that it'd be smaller or viewed from a distance, but then just put it right up to the path you're driving on. Ending on a positive note, they finally got water that looks good. Looks fantastic even. A far cry from what we were seeing in Wave 1. Overall, this track is a little forgettable, but by no means bad. DK Mountain, one of the personal faves by, I think, everyone. It's great to see this double dash track return. Obviously, this is built off the tour version, but it's remained mostly untouched since even the original GameCube version, which is fine. It's still a great track, and I should give the team credit for making some changes between this and its tour counterpart. They removed some of the railings, added more curvature to the last couple of hairpins, still no anti-grav unfortunately, and threw in some DK barrels at certain points of the track. This is just a reused asset from DK Jungle, but I'm not against their addition since I think they complement DK Mountain well. Something I should mention since the Mario Kart community has been creaming their panties over this is that you can take a cut here by jumping off this ramp. Cool shortcut, but the dip in the ledge here that even makes this possible was already in the tour version. It's not a change they made for 8. The big difference simply being that Mario Kart Tour's engine will automatically constrain you to the track while 8 will not. Again, it's a cool little skip, don't get me wrong, but the way I've seen it discussed is as if Nintendo put in all this effort to add a brand new shortcut when that isn't the case. Another thing they didn't change for 8, although I thought they did, was this bridge here. I gave it credit in my live stream because I thought giving it this twisting effect was cool, which it is, but this was in tour. It's not something 8 added. The colors are great, the overall art direction still holds strong, although beyond this ridiculously good looking gravel texture when you land from the cannon. I mean seriously, what the f***? The overall presentation is pretty basic. Not bad mind you. I guess the best way to illustrate that point would be to show a side by side with DK Jungle from Base 8, which would probably be its closest comparison. Again, DK Mountain by no means looks bad. Pretty good actually, comparatively speaking when talking about the booster pass. Nevertheless, I would never mistake this as anything but something that came from tour. For me, the retro stuff needs to be reimagined either visually or mechanically to keep things fresh. And as much as I love DK Mountain, I don't think this version is doing either. I'm sorry, but not marking some of these rocks as out of bounds territory is not reimagining the track. DK Mountain is still a ton of fun, which is clearly all that matters for most people, but I wish we would have seen a few more changes considering this is appearance number 4. Daisy Circuit, I'm just going to ignore that, one of my absolute favorite circuit tracks. I'm really glad to see this one return. Although after giving DK Mountain the cold shoulder, I think it's only fair to likewise point out this version of Daisy Circuit does not reinvent the wheel in the graphical or mechanical department either. The biggest change since Tour would probably be the stairwell shortcut now activates your glider. Holy cow, it's like a brand new track because of this. Presentation wise, while I wish these bushes looked like bushes and not, I don't know, really glossy clay, listen, I know you guys have nice ass bush assets from Base 8 you can reuse. No reason to keep doing this. It's otherwise fine. I mean, it ain't no Moo Moo Meadows, but a sunset track is pretty much always gonna be pretty. I do want to draw attention to the musical arrangement, which is absolutely gorgeous. Particularly the opening thanks to the inclusion of those flutes. Good shit. Fantastic soundtrack aside, this is a great track despite the fact that not a ton of effort was put into this particular version. Piranha Plant Cove is a track that is very lacking in piranha plants. Luckily for it, that doesn't really matter and it's still a great track. This is a Sunken Ruins course, which makes for a really interesting track location. Again, like many of the other tracks that originated from Tour, all 3 laps have their own unique pathing which takes you on a little adventure in and around these islands. The layout is a little basic, as to say the turns are easy to make and the paths are wide. At the very least, that makes this one fun to play on 200. There's a lot of interesting things to see, but I think the thing that kills the presentation for me is the lighting. The best looking part, and I believe the only part with living piranha plants, is this dirt path on the first lap that's sprinkled with tiki torches, palm trees, and piantas. Looks great, but then you take what should be the big scenic jump at the track and I don't know, it looks really flat. Racing through sunken ruins at night is such a strong premise that could easily lead to some jaw-dropping shots, especially if they played at the moonlight, adding some really dramatic contrast. But unfortunately, they do not. The closest they get are segments like this where they have god rays shining through the water, but even those don't illuminate the track as much as you would want them to. Again, it's a fun track to drive through, especially on 200, but without the saturated colors of the booster course tracks or the fidelity of base 8, the dull colors and the lack of contrast in the lighting turn what should have been one hell of a spectacle into a drab ride. From a track with no vibrancy to a track full of it. Madrid Drive. I like this one. Again, there isn't a whole lot going on here that we haven't already seen in previous Tour City tracks, but that doesn't make it inherently bad. As you'd expect, you got your typical 3 different routes per lap, and to Madrid Drive's credit, the track is very clear to follow even on 200. It's not like a lot of other Tour tracks where the routing feels aimless. Here, I was never caught off guard even my first time playing on 200. Visually, there's some interesting stuff to see. You drive through a museum with some surprisingly high quality art, a giant foosball stadium, I don't know what that's about, and you drive by a sleeping wiggler in the middle of the plaza at the start of the race. I don't know what it was about it, but I really got a kick out of that.
It's like a sleeping wiggler. I've never seen that.
Overall, kind of in the same boat as the Rome track, where it's by no means a bad track, but I really doubt anyone is going to be calling this one of their favorites, considering how interchangeable all the pieces are. Rosalina's Ice World. While I'm a fan of this map on 3DS, it feels like a throwaway here. The 2 notable changes since Tour are these half pipes you're honestly going to want to ignore. On 200, it might have been worth taking if it was extended to the right a bit more, but it starts so late you're more than likely just going to hit the wall before the half pipe. And then they actually added a bit of a shortcut here at the end via a brief little slope. Be warned, you actually need a mushroom to not slow down on this snow. A bit odd since literally right around the shortcut you'll be driving on snow that does not slow you down. Kind of poorly conveyed, sort of seems like a beginner's trap. It sure as hell got me the first time through.
Oh, this is new. I didn't realize I needed a mushroom for that until it was too late.
I should also mention the camera on this declining ice turn is just god-awful. Like, what the hell was going on here? One thing that made the original so memorable was how deep the colors were. It was really visually striking. Impressively, there was actually more color variance in the original 3DS version, whereas here, everything is drowning in blue. I liked the darker shades in the original. Not only did it highlight the track better, but it also made for a more moody atmosphere. Said atmosphere was not only a better compliment to the music, but also Rosalina's character. F***ing girl told a bunch of baby stars a bedtime story about her crying because she was lost in space and would never see her mom again. This is also another booster course track that is hurt by having a very direct base A comparison in the form of Sherbetland. Looking at Sherbetland's ice cave, like holy shit, I forgot how stunning these ice walls looked. Tons of discrepancy in the lighting too that had so much depth. Then back to Ice World. The walls are so flatly shaded by comparison. Not horrible, but at least in regards to Wave 6, this is easily the track that got butchered the hardest. Bowser's Castle 3. Alright, now we're getting to the good shit. I was impressed with this one before the race even started.
Oh, wow, this looks fantastic. This looks really good.
In fact, yeah, why don't we start with visuals this time? In brief, this track looks really, really good. The brick textures are super high def and crunchy, and I like the look of the lava flowing down as you race up it. Not a single flat texture or low poly model in sight. Then in terms of layout, this track was translated really well. I can still tell exactly what track it is as it keeps basically the same layout as the original, but it's modernized in a lot of creative ways. Obviously, there's the part with all the ramps we just looked at that is now sloping upwards with the lava, but then there's a stretch near the end that originally had 3 narrow hallways separated by walls, which this one still has, but now you can drive on top of those dividers. Super cool touch. Also, this remix is sick as hell. Great music is something that's been pretty consistent since base Mario Kart 8, and this one is one of the best. That electric guitar really sells it. My only 2 critiques, and they're pretty minor, is 1, I wish this turn after all the ramps was at a 90-degree angle to justify the anti-grav. Granted, not a single booster course pass has you driving on walls or ceilings, since most of these are pretty direct ports from Tour, which I'll get into at the end, but it wouldn't have taken that much extra work in this scenario. And 2, I wish there was more colors. In base 8 Bowser's Castle, for instance, there's more contrast in the lighting, which helps certain elements pop better. In Castle 3, the whole screen screen is just kind of orange. But again, that's a minor critique because as I said, the texture work here is very well done. Overall, they did a great job with this one. Easily one of my favorites of the entire Booster Course Pass. Last but certainly not least is Rainbow Road from Mario Kart Wii. This is another track they did a great job with. I want to start off by saying that it's nice to have a vibrant Rainbow Road that isn't just blue. In my Wave 3 review, I commented on how blue the road was in 7's Rainbow Road for the Booster Pass, and got some pushback from people insisting that, no, it's not blue, it's a rainbow. But now that we have another Booster Pass Rainbow Road for a direct side-by-side comparison, no, that is totally blue. I'm putting my foot down on this one. It's like they took a rainbowy road and then slapped a 30% blue opacity filter over it.
It looked like shit.
But here, they really knocked it out of the park. So vibrant, so pretty. Basically, this is what you expect to see when playing a track called Rainbow Road. I really dig that glitter effect they have on the track as well. Again, this is a really pretty remake. In fact, this is easily the most vibrant Rainbow Road out of all 5 in Mario Kart 8. Yeah, Mario Kart 8 has 5 Rainbow Roads. Isn't that nuts? Mechanically, the only difference I noticed was they added those anti-grab pegs that make you spin on those 2 turns before the launcher. Other than that, this is basically 1-to-1. I wish they would have done a bit more of the anti-grab specifically, but all in all, this is a pretty good note to end the DLC on. Not much else to say other than good job. Well, not only is that all of Wave 6, but we've now taken a look at all 48 tracks in the Booster Course Pass. So I guess I should make some closing statements on the DLC as a whole. The Booster Course Pass has been quite the ride. Start to finish, it has varied in quality greatly. Although even at its worst, it's always been fun. But the DLC being fun has way less to do with the lack of effort being put in, and way more to do with the fact that Mario Kart 8 is still as fun as it ever was. And these fan favorite tracks are likewise still as fun as ever here in the Booster Pass. Most of these came down to solid choices to bring back. It's not like Base 8 for instance, where a lot of once mediocre tracks were made good by making some drastic changes. The tracks that differ the most here are the ones from GBA and SNES. And again, those changes should be credited to Tour, not this DLC. I know there's some that had an aneurysm basically anytime I talked about graphics, but that is where the majority of the team's effort went towards. Otherwise, all the biggest changes, again, should be credited to Tour, not the Booster Pass. Does that make them bad? Of course not. They're a blast to play, but really that should be a given. You'd have to really go out of your way to make Mario Kart 8 not fun to play. Even if you play a custom track by someone who's clearly new to the modding scene, that's still fun. I think the biggest difference between how I've been viewing these tracks and how, say, your common Redditor has been viewing these tracks is that a lot of the Mario Kart community has been viewing this Booster Pass from the standpoint of, is it fun? I don't think there's any debating that it isn't fun, but since it is, to seemingly many, that means they did a great job. But for me, I would be more surprised if it wasn't fun. Due to that, I've instead been viewing it from the perspective of how much effort did they put in. And with the exception of that great soundtrack and a small few of the tracks, I think the answer is not a whole lot. The part I'm having the most fun with, or rather, the thing that makes these tracks so fun, is the great foundation of the track established in whichever Mario Kart it was first introduced, and then the engine of 8 itself, which was done 9.5 years ago on the Wii U. All of these are the same layouts as what we saw in Tour, and because Tour doesn't have anti-grav, not a single course of the entire 48-track DLC has you driving on walls or ceilings. That was the entire gimmick of Mario Kart 8, literally on the front of both the Wii U and the Switchbox art. You got people driving upside down. Instead, we'd get tracks like Sky High Sunday, and the anti-gravity would just haphazardly be on the whole time despite never having any walls or ceilings to drive on. Again, that does not mean it's not fun, because these totally have been, albeit these are the reasons I've been so critical. It's not the team's A game, although not being their A game does not mean it's not worth $25, because even though these might not be on the same standard as Base 8, 48 tracks for $25, and they decided to throw in some new characters on top of that, that's just a good deal. It greatly expands the Mario Kart 8 experience. If you play at a party or with a more casual group of gamers, all that's going to matter is that people are having fun playing Mario Kart. A virtue of just being released on the Wii U, which not a lot of people had, not too many people got to try Mario Kart 8, which was a shame because this is my absolute favorite entry. But between being ported to the Switch, and now with this massive Booster Course Pass, Nintendo has given so many people not only the opportunity, but a reason to play this entry for themselves, having a great time with one of Nintendo's finest games. And if nothing else, the Booster Course Pass deserves credit for that. So despite everything, I would say, yeah, the Booster Course Pass is worth it. It's been fun playing more Mario Kart, and it's been fun doing these videos. It's just fun to discuss Mario Kart. What we like, what we didn't like, what didn't work, what kicked ass. It was exciting to see the team knock one out of the park, and even when they didn't, it was still fun to play and discuss. Given each and every wave has been some of my most requested videos ever, I think many of you would likewise agree with that sentiment. So until Mario Kart 9, we have a hell of a lot of content on our hands. Until Nintendo announces the next game, we have the ultimate Mario Kart experience to keep us busy. Whether you agreed or disagreed, thanks to everyone for following me on this journey. Until the next time we meet, I hope you all have a great time of all 48 tracks. Keep racing on. Hey, thanks for watching. I'd like to give a special thanks to patrons such as Evan Halbert, Some Crazy Idiot, Ian, David Marchesi, GamePlayer1500, Kenzel TN, Drew Kellenberger, David Pacheco, Victoria Mars, Amanda Guth, and Rolling Batter. Again, thank you so much for sticking with me for this entire booster course pass, and until next time, have a good one.